At this time, I have a Grasshopper opened, and I have a point component, and I have a panel. The panel can be found here, and the point can be found there, under this panel, which is the first one by default. Now, one thing you will see is there's nothing here in the panel, and the point did not output anything, so there's no data. And if you look at this bubble here, you will have more information about what went wrong. So the fact that it's orange tells you that something went wrong. There's something that's not the way it's meant to be. And so if you click on this bubble here, you will see what the problem is. So in this case, it says the floating parameter point failed to collect data. So there's no data within this point. So how do we give it data? Well, there's two ways to do that. One is to use a Rhino, create a point, and this will be used to create a referenced object. So in Grasshopper, there is two methods to interact with Rhino. One of them is to create geometry directly inside Rhino and link the Grasshopper file to a referenced geometry. So in this case, we're taking a point. We can select it here and assign it, or we can go directly in Grasshopper. We can do a right click on the component, and we can set one point. And so what this does, whenever you do a right click on any component, you have additional options, and what this specific option will do is it will allow you to set a reference object to the point component. So now Grasshopper disappears, and if you look at the top in the commands, it says 1 point added to selection. That was the last command I ran, but the current one is point object to reference, and it's saying you must select a point. So if you select 2 points, guess what happens? Nothing, because in Grasshopper we said we would select a single point. So we have to select the 1 point. So we select the 1 point, and you can see the point in Rhino became red. This point now is white. And if I select on the component within Grasshopper, you will see it becomes green inside Rhino. And now you can see what is the output. The output is a referenced point. So this is how you would reference geometry from Rhino into Grasshopper. Now, one of the issues that this creates is you will be able to reference the object, but if I close Rhino 8 and I reopen it, these points will no longer be there. So the referenced object will not be linked anymore. It will not recognize any referenced object within the point. So for this method, you must have a Rhino file saved with your geometry so that it refers to the geometry within the file inside Grasshopper. So in some cases this makes a lot of sense because you may create a complex definition, for example a pattern that applies to a surface, a four-sided surface. And so you would have a blank surface, which by the way you can find here under surfaces. Oh, actually, no, in this case it would be one of the parameters. It would be a geometry, which is one of these geometry types, so you can use a surface or a brep. If you know it's a surface, it's probably this one. So maybe you have this surface, you have a full definition, and you have nothing set for the surface as you open your Grasshopper file. And then you may have a surface here within Rhino, and you set one surface, and then further down the line it will create all of the geometry for this pattern. So this is the purpose of having a referenced object. Now in some cases you do not want a reference object, you do not want to depend on a Rhino file, and so you would create a point directly in Grasshopper. So these are two different methods. So you can have your points, or you can, instead of using points within Rhino, you can create a point. So here you have the same issue where it is orange, but we can go under vector, And under vector, you have this little icon that says x, y, z. And this icon allows you to either construct a point or deconstruct a point. So this one here is to construct the point, and the second one is to deconstruct the point. So what do? Well, one is an output from a point, where you can take one or multiple points, you connect them, and you will see you can identify the numbers that define the point for the x, y, and z coordinates. And so the other one does the exact opposite. It allows me to take three numbers, input them as x, y, and z coordinates, plug it in, and create a point. So these are two different methods that you can use Grasshopper. One is to use referenced geometry, and the other one is to create the geometry directly from Grasshopper without depending on a referenced object. So I hope this makes sense and that this helps you get a better sense on how you may be able to use Grasshopper either within Grasshopper by itself or dependent on objects within Rhino.